Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Tim Kallenborn. I'm responsible for corporate sales in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And I would like to present you today CRX Markets, a new approach to working capital finance. And before I explain what we are doing and our value proposition, I would like to give you a background why we are doing it. And this is related to some challenges we see currently in the market. First of all, we see unstable global markets, an uncertain outlook. For example, Brexit is one example of this, Italy another one. Recession could happen in some countries or areas. And this requires a well-positioned working capital strategy. Next to this, corporates are always under pressure to improve their financial KPIs, but also delivery and social performance. Especially social performance is very important when we look at industries where you as a corporate have customers which want to have sustainable products. Next to this, we see a high pressure that existing manual processes should be digitalized. And another big challenge is that the globally operating supply chains are harder and harder to control, especially if you think about the suppliers of your suppliers. You don't know exactly what they are doing and how they are doing it. The last trend is that corporate treasuries, they don't want to rely on one funding partners. They want to usually work with all their relationship banks. And part of these challenges are already covered in the market. But it's still a bank-dominated market with different systems, with minimal ERP integration. This, of course, leads to a lacking visibility and transparency, so you don't differentiate, or you can't very good differentiate between infrastructure costs on the one hand side and funding costs on the other hand. This leads definitely also to a non-competitive pricing. You usually agree to terms which are also valid in 2 or 3 years. And also for some regions or currencies, there's potentially also limited liquidity available. And last, what we see is that certain solutions are not scalable. And this is one example. Let's consider you are a corporate and you want to set up a supply chain finance program. And you want to start in North America, Canada, and the US. You select one bank because this is the best bank. It's very it's very competitive. It has a great network there. You run this program very successful, and then you want to shift it over to Europe, to another region or country. And then you realize, okay, you don't want to work with this bank also there. So you select then another bank for Europe. And what happened is that you have 2 systems, 2 contracts, 2 pricings. And if you then imagine that you have to shift this to another country or to another region like Asia, then these solutions are not scalable at all. And this is exactly the reason why CRX was founded, to bring more flexibility, more scalability, more competition into a bank-dominated market. And what the Treasury usually wants is an all-in-one solution out of one ERP integration, which is worldwide available. And we offer receivables finance on the one hand side and payable finance on the other hand side. So there we differentiate, for example, between dynamic discounting, where you as a buyer can provide excess cash and pay your suppliers earlier against the discount. And on the other hand side, reverse factoring solutions, where you can decide if you work with your banks or with your investors or with a combination together. And you can freely decide which banks are providing funding at any time, which investors you accept that they can participate, or if you invest your own excess cash. And we don't want to stop here only on receivables and payables. We are currently looking also into inventory financing. We are looking into purchase order financing. Receivable securitization will be one of the next steps. And the beauty of working with CRX Markets is that you have a full automation. So we have the full integration into the ERP system of our corporate clients. There are no manual processes left. And by doing this, we can offer at the same time very flexible solution. So what I mentioned earlier, you can decide which solution you are going to take when and whenever you want. So it is possible, for example, that you start with a reverse factoring model, change it later to dynamic discounting or the other way around, or you add for certain countries, regions, again, another solution like receivables finance, but always out of one ERP integration. And if you're going to decide to work with your different banks and investors, you can choose if you set them up as competitor and they beat always about the best pricing, or if you give certain exclusivity to regions, countries, or currencies and have some kind of wallet sharing for your relationship banks. By doing this, you have the full transparency in terms of infrastructure costs and funding costs, and you have a great scalability. So one example is that we structure for each program an individual legal documentation where you can say then also at a later stage you add another bank or potentially one of your core relation banks steps out, but you can bring in another one without having an effect on your supplier base, because they only have to accept, for example, one legal documentation. It doesn't matter how many funders you want to bring in. Fully digitized processes are key. The onboarding process, for example, is completely electronically available. And if you are going to work with CRX Markets, you have an independent and compliant partner. Independent because we don't have any banks or private equity in our shareholder structure. We are completely privately owned. Compliant because we are fully regulated. And looking ahead to tomorrow, CRX will offer data-driven decision making, not only for corporates, but also for banks and investors by using techniques from artificial intelligence or machine learning. And so far, we had a very good start. We are live for 4 years now on 37 countries, on 5 continents. Our growth or our annual growth rate has been tripled in the last years, and we want to further accelerate our growth. We work currently with 28 banks and investors together. Some of them you see on the right-hand side. As I mentioned, the access also for all banks and investors is free. We onboard them as soon as you want. And on the top, you see some of our selected clients. We have heavyweight champions like a Nestle or a Daimler, but also smaller accounts like Döhler or Duvenbeck. And this is another big advantage of the CRX platform, because we can adapt our structure and our solution based on your needs and requirements. It doesn't matter if you are a large heavyweight champion or a smaller corporate.